Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Untrivial Podcast. My name is Allie Nelson. It's been a minute. Last I told you guys I was taking a break from the podcast for a few months. I had such a hectic semester last semester of school, and honestly, I don't even think I could have done the podcast at the same time because it was just so busy. But it's finally over. I'm back to a regular amount of courses. And so I'm really excited to pick up the podcast again moving into 2026. The other exciting thing that happened last semester was I decided to apply to a Master's of Psychotherapy program. So my current master's is not clinical. So the program I'm in right now, you wouldn't be able to graduate and then practice psychotherapy. It's basically just like additive knowledge and understanding of mental health, but not providing you with the certifications or the approval to then become a psychotherapist or someone who supports people clinically. And so I've kind of been thinking of this path and practicing psychotherapy for a really long time. My undergrad was business and psych, and I always debated going back and just doing more psych, but I didn't end up doing it. And it's just something I've been thinking about for a really long time. And I finally was in a place where I was learning about, all things related to therapy and mental health, and felt like I really wanted to try and do this and pursue the clinical path, and I got in. I got it. So that was also happening this past semester, which just made it extra stressful because not only was I doing all my finals for my 3 courses, but I was writing my application. I was getting all my references. I had to interview. I had to do a video submission. Like, it was just so overwhelming. But I'm just really happy to say that I ended up getting accepted. And so I will be training to become a psychotherapist in the coming years, which is it's just so exciting. I'm really happy. And I guess you guys can tell, even just with this podcast, I talk a lot to psychotherapists and people in that space who study, mindset and human behavior and just everything related to our mental health. And so I'm just really pumped that this passion can turn into something more professionally as well, and helping people one-on-one or couples. And yeah, that's kind of like my biggest update since we last spoke. And I'm just really hopeful that I can keep doing this podcast and keep learning more from experts in this space too, and just growing in all the ways. And I think 2026 in January, it's a really good time to start talking about growth and what we envision for ourselves as the new year arrives. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that on the podcast today. I personally am a huge fan of New Year's and resolutions and setting intentions. I just think it's a really fun practice. And this year we had a really low-key New Year's Eve. It was just me and my husband basically just sitting on the couch and reminiscing and talking all about 2025 and what that year had in store for us, and then talking about everything we want to see for ourselves in 2026. But I love taking the time to reflect before just jumping in the next thing. And every year my best friend, her husband, and me and my husband set these words as intentions for our year. You can have 1 or 2 words, and basically it's what do you want to embody, or what do you want to think about and really focus on in the year ahead, and how do you see that manifesting? And so I was thinking back on 2025 because my word was thoughtfulness, and I really meant it in the sense of being really thoughtful with my friends and really oriented towards community. But in hindsight, I think maybe I just had the wrong idea of what having a 6-month-old and moving into having a 1-year-old would look like in 2025, because it was just a year where that wasn't really possible to prioritize to the level that I was hoping. It was still a year where I was really wrapped up in 100% parenting and being on all of the time with my son. It was school, and there are some things that just end up having to be moved down the list of priorities. And unfortunately, cards and really sweet extras wasn't really possible in the way that I was hoping. And like motherhood kind of makes you have to ruthlessly prioritize like what you're focusing on and what you're spending your time doing. And it was kind of one of those years where I just had to not let the cups fully dry up rather than keeping them all the way full. So it was like seeing my friends the rare occasions that I could and making time for the special birthdays or send-offs or moments that were really, really impactful, but it didn't look like a ton of weekend hangs or, you know, nights out. Like that just wasn't what that year was or could be. But it was kind of maintaining to the level that I could just to still be present, to still make space for those areas of my life and not letting them completely starve, but not also having them like overflowing with effort and intention either. So yeah, I think looking back on 2025, if I could change my word, it would have become regimented, because the amount of like planning and scheduling and time boxing that I had to do and did do just to keep everything afloat in terms of parenting and self-care and friendships and marriage and school. Like there's so many plates you're spinning, and it's like, how do you make space to keep all of those together, even imperfectly? But I found just like scheduling and making sure I was really thoughtful about the time was the only way I could maintain every area of my life to some sort of degree. But yeah, it was interesting too. Like I love going on Instagram and seeing everyone's kind of year in review and recaps and all the amazing things that people got up to or experienced. And I just feel like my year wasn't full of big, big milestones, if that makes sense. Like I had all these great moments, but they were not really about me. They were a lot about my son, and they were a lot about his firsts, like his first words and steps and his first birthday. And it wasn't a year that really felt glamorous in the sense of like a big highlight reel that I could showcase online. It just really was quietly beautiful in this very different way. And I think sometimes you can feel, I don't know, like I felt a little bit worried that I didn't have, you know, a year of, you know, big things happening. But I think just this year and in early motherhood, it's not always about your moments. It's about the moments you can support and be there for and enable with your baby, and those being the really special things that happen in your year versus, you know, a huge promotion or a big backpacking trip or, you know, getting engaged or anything like that. Like those obviously can happen at the same time, but for me it was really focused on him, and I loved it. I loved it, but it was quiet and understated at the same time. Moving into this year, I am really excited to change a few things up and get a little bit more consistent now that my crazy semester is done and we're moving into the new year. And also my son is starting daycare, and there's just a few things that are changing in my personal life that I think hopefully will lend well to having a little bit more balance. And actually, speaking of that, I didn't tell you my words for this year. But for 2026, my words are balance and embodiment. And balance for me is really hoping to move from motherhood in the all-consuming side, which is beautiful and necessary in those early days, and moving more to a little bit more self-care, self-development alongside still being a very present parent, but balancing those two things a little bit more equally. I think in the early days, motherhood is like 95%, and then you are like 5%. And I'm hoping to get to a little bit more of like 60-40, 70-30, something a little bit more stable that can enable a little bit more space for me. And then embodiment, what I mean by that is moving from this place of experimentation and messy beginnings to a little bit more of like a thoughtful execution around how I'm doing things and what I'm doing. With this podcast, for example, I think there are some things that I want to change to have it reflect a little bit more of the direction I want it to go. I want to start posting on TikTok a little bit more seriously and writing on LinkedIn a little bit more seriously. Like there's just certain things where last year and the year before, it's almost like you're finding your voice and you're experimenting and you're seeing what feels right for you. And this year, I just want it to click. Not that I will not stop iterating, but I just think this next iteration moving into this year is going to be a little bit more reflective of like what I really see for myself and like this space of podcasting, writing, creating, and how I just want to put things out into the world. So for the podcast in 2026, I'm thinking of bi-weekly episodes instead of weekly. It's just not super sustainable just in my current life stage. And so bi-weekly is what I'm aiming for. Still want to include a ton of guests that I'm really interested in. There's a couple different topics that I'm really excited to get into that I'm already thinking about for the new year, but a couple would be estrangement. That's like a very hot topic right now, but there's a lot of therapists and creators who talk specifically on it. And I want to really get in deep in that. I'd love the idea of talking about like matrescence, which is basically the experience you go through when you enter motherhood. So think of like the word adolescence. Like everyone knows there's like that huge shift, like hormonally, psychologically, just developmentally when you go through adolescence. And if you don't know what matrescence is basically that same massive shift in all of those different parts of you when you enter motherhood and when you have a child. And so there's a couple experts on this topic that I'd want to talk to. I'm also really interested in talking about the differences between our generations, like Gen Z versus millennial versus Gen X and boomer, and like how all of those different moments in life and like the time of life that we grew up in really shape us. And I just want to dive deeper into that. I think it's such a cool topic. But if there's anything you want me to explore, definitely shoot me a DM. I'm really just going to focus on what I'm curious about, but I would love to hear what you are also curious about too. I also want to do more solo episodes. I love just kind of sitting and talking to camera and like talking about things I've learned, but I also want to talk a little bit more about things that are happening culturally, almost more in real time, like as news is unfolding, as things are changing. Like I love the idea of just getting a little bit more current in terms of when exactly something is happening and when people are talking about it. Like I would love to just explore concepts like that in real time. The other change with the podcast that I want to do is playing it a little bit less safe. I think when I started the podcast, I wanted to make it really accessible. And I think I maybe watered certain things down a little bit more than I intended to. And it's not that I don't want people who have never heard of a topic or a concept to understand anymore. It's just that even if it's new, I still want to go to the depth that I want to go to. And I think before I was keeping it a little bit more surface level in some of the conversations. And now I kind of want to take those guardrails off. And I think there's a lot of podcasts that do kind of cover the high level stuff, but I also think I'm capable of going a little bit deeper and doing something a little bit different that has a bit more depth to the exploration of certain things. And so that's what I really want to try and experiment with this year and see if it lands and if it's received well. But that is going to be the goal. It's like we'll go on a topic and it'll be no holds bar. Like I will just explore it the way that I really want to, regardless of if I think it's too nuanced or niche or weird. Like I just really want to try it. So let me know what you guys think once that starts. I'm really, really pumped for 2026. I feel like there's just this fresh energy in the air and I'm feeling really hopeful and optimistic. But if 2025 taught me anything, it's really just that you can still grow and change and evolve, even if it's messy and imperfect and kind of bad, and no one really sees it or no one really knows about it except for you. Like I really still count that as a huge win. And sometimes your growth is not going to be this giant milestone that everyone can see and you can point to. Sometimes it's just you're more regulated. And it's just like these small little wins that accumulate over a year that can still mean massive shifts for somebody, even if it's not, this glamorous pinnacle moment for you. And I think those are just the first stages before you can come into something a little bit more bold, I guess, a little bit more obvious, because you're not going to get there without all the little shifts beforehand. And some years are just not meant to be these big, bold years. Some years are quiet and others are big, and it's okay if your year was either of those things. But yeah, consider this your permission, if you needed it at all, to try something and be okay being bad at it, and laughing at yourself and enjoying it just because you're doing something new or you're doing something scary, and it doesn't need to be perfect. And so I'm just really excited to keep that in mind moving into 2026, but also honing things a little bit more clearly. Obviously at the end of the year, there's like Spotify Wrapped, and they have a Wrapped for creators. And so even though I wasn't producing any episodes the last few months of the year, I could still look at my year in review, and it's crazy. Like, I wouldn't even say I have delivered like super consistently over the year, and I was still in the top 10% of podcasts in terms of reach and shares and comments. And like, I'm not saying that to toot my own horn. I'm literally saying that to be like, me making this podcast in my basement with a couple of cameras and my computer is like, it's possible to get a lot further than you think you can. And I still think, like all the podcasts we know and love and see on the charts are like the top 1% of creators. Like, let's be real. And like the top 10% is probably encapsulating a ton of podcasts. So again, I'm not trying to say I'm special by any means, but being in the top 10% just by nature of showing up and trying your best in the time that you have, even if it's not perfect in your eyes, like that's really exciting, and like it's just really special. And I just think seeing that and then wondering how much further I could take it if and when I have a lot more time to focus on it and a lot more energy to focus on it, like it just is very motivating. And so I just share that to tell you that even if you think you are nowhere near where you want to be, or you're comparing yourself to like the best of the best in whatever thing that you want to do, don't do that. like you could still be incredible. You could still be, outpacing 90% of people. And that's worth something. I definitely have struggled in the past comparing myself and what I do to like top 1% of people. I don't even know why we do that. It's so silly. But I've really needed to learn this year to understand that circumstances and privilege and time and capacity look different for everybody. And you should just never measure yourself against someone else when you have no idea what any of those circumstances look like for them. Like, it's just not fair to you or to them. Like, you don't know what struggles they're facing. You also have no idea if they have way more support than you. Like, it just isn't helpful, really, in any way. Like, all you should really be doing is comparing yourself to who you were yesterday, who you were a month ago, and like what your path looks like, because that's the only path you're on. Their path doesn't really matter. There's no point in comparing yourself to them. All you can do is work to make your own circumstances better, try your hardest, do the best you can do, learn as much as you can with the time that you have, with the space that you have, with the resources that you have, and you will be taking steps forward. And that's growth. That's all that matters. And so in 2026, I hope that you have so much growth, so much alignment, that you are setting intentions. Let me know if you pick any words for your year. I'd love to hear them. But I'm just really excited to connect more in this space and share more and go deeper and give more. And hopefully it resonates with you. So thank you for tuning in. Happy 2026, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.